Hello. You here for the breakout session?
It looks like I'm the only one.
It's right now it's a one-on-one, so
Oh my.
thank you for showing up. How's your event been so far?
Good.
And yeah, this has been just been in the room. I had my booth. I was unmanned so I could get everything set up. So what do you do?
I'm with Lead Maryland Foundation.
Okay.
We provide leadership training for people in agriculture, natural resources, and rural communities.
Okay.
And it's a 2-year fellowship program. And we do a lot of public issues education and communication skills and personal development.
Soft skills training.
Yes.
All those fun things that they don't always teach in school.
Right, professional development, about legislation development and so on, and networking and learning more about yourself as well.
That's awesome. Right. Have you heard of the MBIA, the Maryland Business Innovation Association?
Yes.
So in the state of Maryland specifically, there's a total of 24. They're called business innovation centers. They're basically incubators. I am a member of the one in Howard County called the Maryland Innovation Center.
Okay.
And it's funded by grant funding. It's intended for small businesses that are looking to either get started or just they're really kind of loose about it. A small business owner is all you really need to be. And specifically for me, it was for $25. It was an 11-week course. I had to meet at night. So obviously this is a challenge sometimes for farmers, but it was 6 to 9 once a week. We got a $15 stipend for dinner. So I made money on the deal, if you will. And they basically went through the process of creating a entire complete pitch deck. If you had and it now includes public speaking. And it's one of the things I heard about is like there's so many programs out there. And the interesting thing is every farmer is a small business owner.
Yes.
So, it's one of those things where specifically the public speaking piece of it, because I talk for a living. This is, I stood in front of 200 young farmers and I didn't have a prepared speech. I just talked for 5 minutes and I'm told it was good. Not everyone can do that, but I've been doing this for 20 plus years.
Right.
And I've had formal public speaking training that I got as part of my professional development. And I take that for granted because I would see so many small businesses that, we were like classmates. I went through the program 3 times because no one said that I couldn't. And hey, I paid the $25 each time. And it allowed me to refine and see other people's stories because there was bakeries, there were legal services, just sometimes people that had the beginning of an idea
Right.
and hadn't even started a business yet. I just was a little bit further along on the process. So it was a super useful thing. And again, taxpayers' money at work. And I believe every single county has one of these innovation centers, and it's not expensive, or at least I don't consider it expensive for what you get from it. So I bring that up because it sounds like there might be some alignment, and a lot of people just don't know about each other. So you said leads?
Lead, LEAD.
Do you have a card or?
I have a booth downstairs.
Oh, okay.
So we're right at the first booth you come into the door.
Gotcha.
Right.
Oh, I just realized I forgot to put my name tag back on. Oh well.
So.
Well, if you'd like, you can get a private run through of the presentation or whatnot.
Sure. Because I was interested in seeing if this would be a topic that I would want to present to my class. Because I'm the program director for Lead Maryland.
Okay.
So I put together the agendas and the topics and so on for the 2 year.
The program to get through there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I might be slightly biased, but we call it cyber ag. It's agriculture, and I'll go through this. It's inextricably linked with technology now. You can't not participate in this sometimes wonderful, sometimes terrible world which we have built for ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, let me just jump into it. So the topic is, protecting America's food supply from ransomware and cyber attacks. This is probably the longest PowerPoint presentation I ever give. Let me just make sure it's working. Off to a good start here. Click. There we go. So I wanted to just real quick understand what it is I actually mean when I say ag tech innovations. What are the modern challenges that we're facing with cyber attacks and what can actually be done? One of the intentions is, and I have a pamphlet over here I can share, is to give practical advice to farmers that will help protect them without having to spend a dime. Because they don't usually run into people that wear shirts like this. And so who the heck am I? Well, my name is Colin Hamill. I am the founder and IT solution designer for Sentinel Forge Technologies. My background is I'm a graduate at the University of Maryland, and I got my bachelor's degree in computer science. I have more than 15 years experience as a pre-sales solutions architect is the technical term, which is a fancy way of saying I was the smart guy who sat next to the sales guy and did all the hard work.
And set it all up.
Exactly.
Right.
What's a little different from a lot of my peers, I also attended Loyola University while I was working, and I got my MBA focusing on information systems. So I could now speak the language of business as well as the language of technology. And lastly, I am a proud member of the Maryland Farm Bureau. I founded my company after the Colonial Pipeline attack. Do you remember that in 2021? When we saw these fuel lines like we hadn't seen before, I kind of realized at that point that if the same thing were to happen to our farmers, this is what we would be seeing. Hungry, cyber attacks on farmers equals a hungry American. And speaking as someone who likes to eat food and doesn't know how to grow their own, if they got hit, I would be facing starvation in a matter of weeks. So it's very personal for me and my family as well. I'm a proud member of the Maryland Farm Bureau for more than 4 years now as a friend of agriculture. And so one of the pleasures I've gotten is the opportunity to speak with farmers, people that frankly not a lot of people in my circle ever really interact with in a meaningful way. So what ask, who are you? We've already done that. So let's run through farmer.
We're also a program that's under the University of Maryland Extension.
And this is the thing, there are education resources, nonprofit resources, all sorts of social groups and things that all have wonderful acronyms and these great programs, and they're walking by each other in the dark. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, if you only knew what you are everyone is recreating a wheel. And it's frustrating sometimes because everybody's got good intention. We're burning a lot of that energy on, but there's not a great way to connect it. Again, until I came here, I had never actually spoken to farmers. If I introduced myself as someone who's in IT, would you know what that means?
Yeah.
Okay. They had no idea. They said, "What's IT?" And I said, "Oh, I work with computers."
Right.
And by the end, though, they knew me as the smart cybersecurity guy with computers. Care to join? You haven't just too much. So what's your name? This is a small session. So what is it that you do?
Oh, a grain farmer.
Okay, you're part of the ag supply chain. So and we've got non-farming business professional. I guess that's me. So just to give a little bit of background because you just missed the beginning, I want to talk real high level about what do I mean by ag tech innovations, talk quickly about challenges we're facing with cyber attacks, and then give some practical advice about what you can actually do about it, as opposed to just being scared. So quite simply, the term ag tech innovation, it basically means we have taken technology and we have put it into the agricultural supply chain. That can be computers, sensors, internet connectivity, AI, all sorts of technology put into agriculture. That's ag tech. A jargony term you might have heard once before, if you ever heard Internet of Things or IoT, that's what they're talking about. I will throw my industry under the bus. We have terrible names for things. The other term is precision agriculture. Again, the idea is that we are modernizing, adding more technology so that we can be, frankly, just better at what we're trying to accomplish here. So why do we want ag tech innovations? Well, it gives us higher productivity, yield. We have a finite amount of land. We cannot create new land. So the only thing that we can do is get more yield out of what we have. Ideally, especially at a time of high inflation, we want to do everything we can that Americans can get the basics, food, everybody needs food. And God willing, they haven't politicized it yet, but it's the one unifying thing. And it allows the farmer who have, again, very narrow margins for profit to use less of some of the most expensive inputs, the fertilizers, the different chemicals that you have to apply. If we can use less of them, more money flows to the bottom line, and it happens to be better for the environment. And your workers are also a lot safer because instead of having humans spraying what can be sometimes very dangerous chemicals, we can now have drones or other sorts of machines that can help us with that application. And it reduces the impact of farming on the rural community, because that's part of what we're trying to preserve. It's not just, it's a way of life, honestly. And part of that is the beautiful environment that we were blessed with in Maryland. So what are some of the examples? I don't want to go too deep, but high level, I've seen things like water management, smart irrigation, which allows you to target and use less water, which in times of drought can be very beneficial, especially since that's a shared resource that is very vulnerable to disruption. We also have smart tractors. You now have a tractor that can be steered with a smartphone, connected to the internet. We have put smart cameras, and I don't have to tell you that AI is the new buzzword. Everything has AI in it, and everyone is rushing to find ways that we can put it in there more. You now have farm management software where you can basically manage every aspect of your farming operation from your smart device, again, connected to the internet. And of course, we have to mention drones. Everybody loves drones. We're putting them in everything. We have them now applying pesticides on remote fields and all sorts of interesting things like that. So before I go too much farther, I just want to ask a quick question. What could possibly go wrong with all of what I just described there?
Sabotage.
Cyber attacks. And one of the challenges that we are now facing is we have put everything on the internet. We have put computers and everything. So we now have, of course, cyber attacks, something we didn't have to deal with 30, 40 years ago. So that's your ransomware, data theft. You might have heard viruses, malware. That's what we're talking about here. The challenge we also is we are part of a very complex global supply chain that was made very clear during COVID, where the price of certain types of food, I remember bacon tripling in price because it comes from somewhere else. And if these supply chains are disrupted, it ripples in a way that you don't really appreciate until it happens. We have become, and I'm guilty of this, profoundly dependent upon technology. If you don't believe me, try to take a Zoomer's phone away from them and see what happens. And unfortunately, we can't turn it off because there are a lot of people on this planet that need to be fed. They all need food. And the only way that we can even hope to do that, again, we have a finite amount of land. We have to do these kinds of things. So we're now exposed to this new kind of problem that we never really had before. And what is the problem? Why should small family-owned farmers care about this? Well, the problem is that hackers have identified small family-owned farmers as easy targets. They are primarily interested in getting into the Purdue's of the world, the ones that do spend a significant amount on cyber attacks. The security officer at Purdue shared with me that his biggest fear was not a direct attack upon Purdue itself. He had over 400 individual suppliers for chicken feed, all of which were small family-owned farms, and none of them likely were spending a single dollar on cybersecurity. The hackers know this, and so they figure if I can get into the farms and destroy them, get into their systems, I can exploit that relationship and go after my real target, which is the big ag tech. Now I can send off my ransom and get my millions of dollars out of the Purdue's. Now, notice that the small farms are also destroyed by this process, and the hacker doesn't frankly care because why would they? It's just meat to them, and that really bothers me. And we face farms that might be hundreds of years old just being lost because of someone trying to steal money, and that's not right. So the other problem is that on the other side of the coin, the companies that are supposed to be protecting us, the big cybersecurity names that you might have actually heard of, CrowdStrike or Fortinet, Cisco, the ones that make really big cybersecurity solutions that I used to sell when I was working in the private sector, their ideal customer is not a small family farm. They want wealthy customers. And I actually I asked, do we have anything for farmers? And they said, farmers? You mean people that grow plants for? No, we have nothing. I was actually reprimanded for wasting my time on that. And again, that's a problem. No one is coming to help. And they're providing us with a really interesting challenge. To be clear, hackers are not dumb criminals. They are frighteningly intelligent and good at what they do. And you underestimate their intelligence at your peril. Just like computers have made everything in our life easier, so too has the hacker's life been made easier. And now computers are doing the vast majority of the work that's involved in they have automated the ransomware process, basically. As I mentioned, we have made the decision to connect literally every single piece of technology into the internet and not necessarily secured it. So it's super easy to find a weak link in the chain and to get through. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, cybercrime is profitable. Why do bank robbers rob banks? That's where the money is. So until we can change that equation, they're going to keep doing it. And again, my fear is that if too big of a cyber attack happens, it could cause the ruin of our civilization, not to put too fine a point on it. Cybersecurity, and I speak as someone in the industry, unbelievably complex, unbelievably expensive, and we talk past people using jargon and acronyms. And I guess most of my peers, we like the blank, confused look on people's face. We pat ourselves on the back about how smart we are. That's not helpful. And at the end of the day, cybersecurity does not grow crops. You will not get superior yields. You won't get better prices at the market. I can't make the weather better. It is a cost as far as a producer is concerned. There's also something, and this is something I very much want to raise awareness of, a concern about crop insurance and something that's called acts of man. Basically, to put it quite simply, crop insurance does not cover things. The example that is usually given is if an airplane crashes into a farmer's field of wheat and the whole wheat field is gone. That is not covered by crop insurance. That is covered by a different type of insurance. Every cyber attack is by definition an act of man. So I have this fear that farmers will believe themselves to be covered and they'll be told, well, you should have bought cybersecurity insurance. I have yet to meet a single farmer that has purchased cybersecurity insurance, so they would basically be out of luck. Why should you care? Well, everybody eats. That's, again, one of those unifying things. And frankly, hackers target everyone. I can't tell you how many people said they would never come after me. I'm too small. My counter question is, how much money does a thief have to steal from you for it to be worthwhile? If they get $5,000 out of you, that's not a small amount of money. And for some farms, that could be a payment that they do not have lying around. Again, these are criminals. They make it up in volume. Again, complex supply chains. Producers are at the very beginning of so many pieces of our society. And again, we don't think about it, unfortunately. My favorite thing that I hear is that, when people say, well, we don't need farms anymore, we just get our food from the store. I'm not even sure what to say to that on that one. And again, we can't not eat. That's not an option that we have. So I wanted to ask the audience, and everyone, again, feel free to chime in. How long do you think a successful cyber attack takes to execute? And I mean from bad guy gets into the environment to colonial pipelines, cyber apocalypse, you owe us 20 Bitcoin. Raise your hand if you think it takes less than an hour. All right, everybody? Less than a week? Nope. Longer? This works better with a larger audience. So unfortunately, not correct. Longer. It's actually on average 4 to 6 months. And people are quite surprised when they hear this usually. And now I want you to think about what's involved in an actual cyber attack. Basically, the bad guy gets someone, tricks someone, usually there's a human, to click on a link, go to a website, download a file, do something that they shouldn't have done, but now the hacker has control of one machine and one user account. And think about how many computers can potentially exist, even at a home these days. So once they're in, they're very, very good at hiding themselves, and they will systematically seek to spread. It's very useful to think of them as a pest. How does a pest spread throughout crops? If you don't catch it early, by the time you notice insects on every single one of your crops, it is far too late to really stop it. That's the same thing. They spread quietly. They don't advertise until, it's too late. So what can actually be done? It seems that if you read the news, even the large companies that do spend millions of dollars in cybersecurity are unable to be protected. So what hope do we have? Well, all hope is not lost. And this is the segment I'd like to use is just to give some practical advice for how people can keep themselves safe from cyber attacks. If you're interested, I have a pamphlet which has basically the same information in it. But one of the biggest things that I can advise is have what I call a cyber 911 and know who they are and how to contact them. Now, what do I mean when I say cyber 911? Well, if you were to look out your window and see that your neighbor's house is on fire, what do? And that number is? Very good. Education system works. My son knows that as well. An older producer in your community gets encrypted and the cyber criminal threatens to spray poison on the larger area unless they pay $5,000. Who do you call? Well, actually, that's an interesting question. Usually, I actually have called my local police department, not using 911, and I asked them, what would you do if I called and said that I've been hit with a cyber crime and they stole my identity or something like that? And the dispatcher was kind of confused by the question. She said, well, I suppose we could send a car out to take a statement. I said, well, what do I do about my computer that's not working? She said, oh, well, I guess you would just call tech support. What is tech support for a farmer? What is tech support for a home user like my parents? They're well-meaning, but they're not set up for this kind of. That's an answer. That actually is a very valid cyber 911. There's nothing wrong with that. And I will tell you, there definitely have business like that to provide that level of support. So the goal is to designate a cyber 911, and ideally this person should be someone like myself, someone that is, works with technology and is willing to do this. I do this for my parents. And what I advise is write down your contact information on good old-fashioned paper, because one, the older audience will typically appreciate that, and two, it is certified 100% unhackable by even the most talented. And the advice I would give is put that information in where you keep your most important papers for your farm, in a fireproof safe, ideally, so that it's sort of like why BGE gives us magnets to put on our refrigerator so that you know who to call in the event of an emergency when you can't just go online and check it up. So tech tip number 2, map out your digital private property. Now, responsible farmers keep good records of all of their land, all of their assets, their machineries, their animals, their crops, all those stocks. Well, in the modern ag tech world that we now live in, there's more parts of your farm that are on the digital sides of things, which unfortunately tends to be a blind spot for a lot of us. So my advice is that apply the same level of care as you would for your fields and your crops. And I would encourage you to enlist your Cyber 911 to help you with that process, because one, they probably have a much faster way of doing it, and two, it'll make their lives easier to know what's in your environment and how to support you. Number 3, again, ask your crop insurance provider ask them this question: what would happen if I was hit by a cyber attack that damaged my crops? So again, typically, historically, crop insurance has been thinking about things like this: airplanes crashing into fields. Now they should be thinking about things like this, where the hacker logs into your new smart trainer and changes the pesticides concentration, so you now burn out a quarter of your fields and now nothing will ever grow there again. That is not covered by crop insurance. And I will tell you, the good news is that the insurance providers know this. And from conversations I've had in the sponsors, they're starting to have a combination plans, whole farm plans that do include a cyber component. But again, I am not a cyber crop insurance provider, so call your crop insurance provider and ask them as soon as you can. Number 4, learn and practice good cyber hygiene. What do I mean by cyber hygiene? Most of the attacks that are out there, with an application of, frankly, common sense, being aware. I hate to break it to anyone, if a king of Nigeria reaches out to you with an opportunity for millions of dollars, that is not real. Everyone, hopefully, knows that. We don't click on the link, but some people still do. And that's where cyber hygiene comes in. You know, there's no shame. You're being tricked by a criminal. If you fall into a cyber attack, call your cyber 911, help them get through it. But what I ask is that, you know, you learn from it, because applying good cyber hygiene is going to take most of the hackers' weapons away from them. Because, again, it's usually a human that is being tricked into this. And last, this is very important, please, please, please respect and listen to your cyber 911. You know, they are helping you out. They're here to, you know, probably doing it for free in many cases. What the question I asked of the young farmers were, raise your hand if you've ever provided tech support for the primary producer. And I want to say 80 to 90% of everyone raised their hands. That is the tech support of farmers. Don't take advantage of that, please. Speaking as a fellow, learn from your mistakes. If you fall for, again, we've got to stop blaming the victim here. You know, I actually chided my parents that one of their peers fell for a phishing scam, and they're like, "What an idiot! What is he thinking?" I'm like, he was tricked by a criminal that has malicious intent. Like, it makes people genuinely embarrassed. They don't want to go for help, and that is the opposite of what we were doing. So again, the charge to be a good cyber 911, you better have respect for your elders. Don't make fun of people, but teach them, so that they don't ideally make the same mistake twice. And, you know, people on the receiving end, please don't make the same mistake twice, or try not to. Things are always changing. And it never hurts to say thank you. So with that, I also wanted to talk just real briefly about my product and what we've been doing. We released something that's designed to be a very cost-effective, highly effective way to change the rules. Hackers have complete unobstructed time. They count on it. They need it because what they do is hard. So my recommendation for your digital environment is set traps and decoys for them to find. Coax easy to detect behavior out of it. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with what this is. This is a pheromone trap that has a pheromone of a defoliating insect, and it's sticky. And if you see a card that looks like that, along with a bunch of others, you now know that it's time to spray. You need to get early warnings. By the time everything is encrypted and you've gotten the ransom, I hate to say it is too late. It is too late to have stopped it. Now we're trying to recover from it. You have to stop it before it happens. So let me just demonstrate how these pheromone traps work. So, and also the rat traps. So the farmer just distributes these things throughout their lands, puts rat traps in the grain silos or wherever rodents are likely to occur. And then he just basically monitors them for any kind of activity. As part of your normal walking in your fields. This doesn't require a fundamentally different way of farming, and the individual cards are inexpensive. Upon detecting pest activity, we now know that the population has risen above a critical threshold. It's now time to spray the same pesticides that you would before. It's just we're only applying them when and where they are needed. So less inputs are needed. After that, you reset it. And again, these cards are inexpensive, so it's not a huge burden to just reset it like that and repeat as you go. With that in mind, let's use that same metaphor. How can we do the same thing to detect hackers? And this is where our platform goes in. So instead of fields, think of the digital environment that you have today. These could be computers, smart TVs, wireless access points, phones, you know, and they're on a computer network. So we would put this new appliance, it's called Guard Tower, and it sits there, it's just a box that connects into your network, just like all your other computers, and it sits there. And it is the one that is monitoring. I'm not asking farmers to start monitoring their networks. It's all internal, everything. It's just sort of a secure, think of it as a cyber burglar alarm for your environment. And these things called Sentinels, they look like they belong there. The sorts of things that a hacker would like to try to attack. And we just watch them and they sit there. And if at any point in the future, someone interacts with them, someone gets into that network and is doing something that they should not be, an alert is now going to be set out. So you're going to know earlier, and that alert email is going to be sent to the Cyber 911, which has ideally been identified before. Now the Cyber 911 can come on site, can help. We can deploy additional Sentinels. And again, we've now caught the attack at a super early stage, catching a pest infestation before it can run out of control. Does that make sense? Excellent. That's basically all I had. I appreciate you both stopping by. What questions can I answer for you? And also, I want to use this time, if you have, there are no questions too untechnical or you should be ashamed to ask. Like, I'm here to ask any questions you might have had about anything.
I have one question.
Sure.
Would using an external hard drive that's, you know, you only put it in when you're working on certain files or what have you, would that be a good proactive way of getting away from?
Sure. So
Preventing.
can an if I understand your question, can an external hard drive be part of an improved cybersecurity position? Is that okay? So the short answer is yes. My father-in-law backs up his computers. There's software called Back where you can back everything up and he writes it to an external drive that he plugs in. I have one of those in my laptop case. The only challenge is that, again, hackers know this. And if you think about it, as soon as that drive plugs in, they are looking for new places to expand to so they could jump. If the computer is infected and you put a drive in there, it would spread. It's still better than keeping everything on the computer because the fancy, we call them air gaps. If you have a backup of all of your data and it's on a drive that's just sitting in a drawer, again, 100% unhackable until you plug it in. So that's the challenge. It's not like a magic bullet. It does help. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Would a cloud be better? Back up in the cloud?
I love, will cloud backups help? So here's actually a specific challenge for a lot of farmers. Per USDA surveys, 25% of farmers do not have access to the internet, full stop. So the short answer would be yes, just like that, it can help, but in some cases, the internet, and if it is available, it's extremely slow. It's got poor connection. They have been improving it, but again, it's the same challenges that are found in the urban areas where I learned that Baltimore City, 40% of households don't have access to the internet. And the reason is largely the same. There's not a lot of money in it and it's a different kind of problem. But in both cases, no one's going to pay huge amounts of money for basic access to the internet. So they just don't want to run the cable. There's been grants that help with it. So that's the basic connectivity issue. The second part is that it's the same thing with the drive. If you have the ability to send data to that cloud thing, a bad guy who takes over your computer also has the ability to go into that cloud drive, click the delete all information. That's a legitimate command that is being used for profoundly illegitimate reasons. And because of that, there's no way to recover from it sometimes. So it's a challenge. Does that answer your question? These things are complicated.
Well, the other thing what that leads to is if the farmers have poor internet connection, then so would the robbers.
Sure.
The cybersecurity robbers. And why would they target them if it's that difficult to get into to access?
Sure. So how would a hacker get into a place? It could be as easy as putting a USB stick into someone's computer that they're not paying attention to, and the rest just happens. Once it's inside, if they're not using technology at all, The Amish are immune largely to cyber attacks because there isn't anything to attack. But everyone has technology that we don't even think about, like a smart TV is a computer with a really big screen. It's connected to the internet. It has a hard drive. It's a computer. We call it a smart TV. It is also vulnerable to having malware. I have instances where that was the platform that they launched attacks from out of your smart TV. That's one of the reasons why, if you saw the guard tower appliance, it's local. It's not in the cloud, because even if I designed it specifically, even if you didn't have access to the internet, the box is still there. As long as you have some method of getting an email out, and that could be a cellular signal or something like that, or a phone, I can still send those alert messages. So I'm not requiring you to have gigabit fiber or anything like that, because again, it's not fair to ask farmers to do that. Some of them are getting more technical from stuff, but this is meant to sit alongside all the techie goodies that are being introduced in the ag tech world. Does that answer your question?
On a scale from 0 to 100, how much danger is there to watch GPS being tampered with by anybody? I mean, it's run by the government, by the military, I think. But I mean, that's my main exposure to internet or AI.
So that's a great question.
I mean,
so you're talking to someone who had to design. I have to see the worst in every situation, because that was my job. You can't design disaster recovery solutions if you can't conceive of a disaster. I would be less worried about GPS itself, the satellites itself, because that would require nation state levels of sophistication. And we have something called the US military, which would hopefully deter people from doing that. What I would be worried about is a tool like, let's say, a smart tractor that uses GPS, which means, let's think about it. It's a computer that is talking to a box that is literally in space and asking, hey, where am I? And the GPS, I think 3 satellites will answer. Well, what if I corrupted the computer so that the numbers that it got back, it added 20 to all of them? How would you tell, looking at the computer that is infected, how would you know if GPS was corrupted? The computer says it's right, but I'm driving on Interstate 95 and I thought I was plowing a field. Like, does that answer your question? I would be more concerned about things that use GPS.
You'd have to be linked up to the cloud with the computer that's in the combine or the tractor.
Right. And that's, again, they all have to phone home to something. A lot of them now, when I first was doing this, we didn't have things like Starlink. So satellite internet has gotten a lot better. And I imagine that's what a lot of the satellite TV was all they had in, out St. Mary's for the longest time. Cable just wasn't on the menu because they don't run cable out there. So that's really where a lot of these smart tractors. The problem is everyone is thinking about the gee whiz factor of what we can do. They're not asking the question, how do I secure it? Because all too many times you have a primary producer who might be 80 years old. Their grandkids say, yeah, we should get this new drone system. A technician comes, it literally plugs it into the home router and walks away. There's no training, there's no security hardening, there's no very basic questions that, again, this is my world, so I can think of a half a dozen, but how on earth would the farmer know to answer those things? And a lot of the people doing the install are there to get in and get out. They're not, they're just a tech. It's like expecting the guys running cable to ask a lot of really deep questions. Like, that's not what they're there for. So that's really the risk that I see. That it's hard to say how much of a risk all of this is because we haven't had a large scale event. The problem is when the large scale event happens, it's already too late to do anything. So if it's all the same, I'd like to not have it happen in the first place. And then again, the challenge is that this is not on a lot of farmers' radar. This is not a lot, because why would it be? Again, I've talked to farmers that have farmed the same land for 65 years who are asking me, why on earth do I need an email address? And I didn't have a good answer for them about that. But unfortunately, they're forced to participate. You have to have an email address. You can't not. And again, it's a unique challenge. Exactly. Well, and one thing I'll say for the afternoon session, I'm gonna have a gentleman named Chris Sherman. He's from North Dakota. He wasn't able to make it because he's got his own farm bureau, but his company is called Tech Support Farm. He has literally founded a business around the idea of providing technical support to farmers for this. And he has existing customers up in North Dakota, and he's looking to expand into Maryland. So at the 4 o'clock session, if you're interested in coming back, I'm going to try to have him as a big head on the screen that we can answer more questions together and talk about his offering and stuff like that. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Anything else? Again,
No.
I'm here for the whole time, so feel free to ask anything that you.
No, I'm good.
Actually, if you don't mind me asking, with all does any of this make into the things you vote on? Does the word cybersecurity ever come up in any of these resolutions or things that are being voted on today and tomorrow?
There may be some policy related to cybersecurity. I can't think of any offhand, but it's not at the top of the list.
Yeah, I know. It's the reason I'm the only cybersecurity provider who keeps coming back to the Farm Bureau, because again, it's the same reason my company said we have nothing for farmers, because they don't want to spend $1 million on cybersecurity.
An entirely fragmented market. There's no question about that.
Well, and not only that, it's just people like me don't have the concept of what a farmer's internal network. It's actually easier to think of it as like a home network, where sometimes again, these are older individuals, they've got a home PC that their wife does the books on the home computer. They maybe have a few smart devices, and they got whatever their cable or satellite company gave them, and that's it. You know, they turn to their grandkids for tech support.
Yes.
And which is great, but grandkids can only do so much when it comes to fighting back against this stuff, because for goodness sakes, they're teenagers. You know, what are we expecting them to do? And I'll say one of the things that this is a personal thing, it's the ag education. I'm hoping if there was a way that we could get technology and specifically security into the education we're providing to our future farmers, because they're the ones who are providing it today.
That's a fact.
So yeah, exactly. And your average farmer is going to find it hard to trust me. I mean, who could trust a guy wearing a shirt like this? But their grandkids, they would listen to.
Sure.
And that's really but the trick is getting there. You know,
to me, that's where a lot of the opportunity is for young kids in agriculture, is with this tech savvy stuff. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, the planters and sprayers are all using all kinds of gizmos that are computer controlled. And it makes a huge difference in the productivity of the machinery.
It does.
And
they're pretty cool.
The ultimate problem is that in the spring or the fall, everybody that's using it needs somebody to help that. And there's not, at peak times of the year, there's not enough people around to get to you. You know, you're waiting a day or 2 or 3 to get somebody.
And this is time sensitive. This is harvest season, and I don't have a few days. My crops will rot in the field if I don't get them out in the right time. No, that I also have been chewing on this the whole weekend. The big thing that we're talking about is how do we get the young people to stay on the farms? You know, imagine if you wanted
That's part of the way, yes.
Well, imagine if there was a way, and I don't want to diminish the work, but imagine if there was a more like a blue collar tech worker where, honestly, I don't necessarily think that when I went to college, there was no such thing as a cybersecurity degree. It didn't exist. There was no cybersecurity. So I don't have one because it wasn't invented yet. My son can do things with computers that he's grown up with them. I am fully convinced that some of the young people on these farms are perfectly capable of doing basic tech support, and maybe they don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. Maybe they could go to a community college where they're also learning ag, where it would be like I'm just spitballing here, an ag tech degree, basically, where you're getting practical, you're not a cybersecurity expert with lots of letters after your name, but frankly, who cares? That's not what farmers need. And they could work in their communities, and you could potentially build a business out of that, small community-based technical support provided by the young people. They stay in the community and they farm while they're at it, ideally. Is that reasonable an idea, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Whether or not it
Absolutely.
would be profitable enough.
That always creeps in, but you know, it's,
I have one that went to community college, worked with me on the farm, has always been into computers. He's now 33 years old.
okay,
Left the farm, drove a tractor trailer for about 4 or 5 years after he got married. And then went into IT currently with a 2-year degree that was
good experience.
it was not even based on IT. I mean, he knew enough about stuff like this.
Yeah.
And took a couple of classes at night, and he's working every day for a company on the Western Shore. He's not working on the farm or on farm related, tech. But he is dealing with IT stuff constantly.
And I would bet dollars to donuts, he's providing tech support to farmers, he's just not getting paid for doing it. Or if he has friends and families that reach,
to me.
yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, that's what I mean, is that you reach out to him because of course you would reach out to him, even if he, you know, wasn't a relative, but it just so happens, like I have the same thing where, there's Trostbacks, their son-in-law is in the Navy working in IT. So whenever they have a problem with their home network or their farm stand isn't connecting to the credit card machine, that's who they call. And he comes and
So in
helps.
Maryland, if you're an IT person, the market is such that you get sucked into the higher paying portion of the IT world.
As I know, because I lived in that world for
Yeah.
2 years and it's nice up
Yes.
there. I'm not gonna lie, it's really, really nice if you can find those, although it is getting a little harder these days to find some of those.
Home about 2 days a week, doing it all online or by telephone.
When COVID hit, for me, it was a Wednesday. But, because I already was working remote, my wife works at Johns Hopkins University as a grant and contracts manager, and her team went 100% remote, and has never gone back. And I was fortunate, my parents, bless their hearts, provided 5-day-a-week childcare for our 4-year-old at the time, so he wasn't in school yet, so we pulled him out and we sort of went into the rural part of the state, and we stayed in St. Mary's County for a year, which is where I grew up. And that's really what kicked off this love of appreciation, if you will. It's actually quiet out there.
Oh, yeah.
You can see stars at night, and everyone is really, really nice. Unfortunately, everything is also really, really far away. I had the best of 2014's technology, a 4G hotspot with 15 gigabytes of data. And then I got to hear the Verizon guy talking to my 74-year-old father, trying to explain to him. And I'm like, let me do this, Dad, please, please. That's fun for me. But yeah, there wasn't, a lot of my friends, when they were like, why doesn't everyone just go remote? I'm like, you don't understand. Like, they can't go remote. They have to go physically where the job is. You saying go remote means don't work. And, you know, I learned that the state of rural broadband is quite sorry around here, where, and frankly, there's poverty in rural areas. In St. Mary's County, most households didn't just have a laptop that their kid could do. They had to be given laptops. They had to be given, oh, go on Zoom. I don't have internet. What do I do? Oh, here's a hotspot that we're giving you. Like, that's all they did.
Right.
It's gotten better, but it's still the case that in a large portion of the country, you just can't get internet.
Or how many cars would sit in the parking lot outside of the library or the
Or the McDonald's.
or
I knew people like that, yeah.
And have their kids do their homework.
And again, that people did, thank goodness we had the remote technology that we did, but it really exposed to me that, like, wow, this is really bad. I didn't realize it was that bad until I wouldn't turn on my webcam because I had to reduce the amount of data I was using so that I only had 15 gigabytes of fast. And then they sold me, it was unlimited 3G. And I don't know if you remember 3G from years ago. It's like trying to drink a soda through a coffee straw.
Right.
It's not great. Zoom doesn't work super well over it.
I had found we had a vacation rental, still do, and I had to wire it for live broadband to get. I mean, it really made a difference, and you're in the market with other properties in the county. And if you're remote, people want to stay in your remote place, but they really don't like being disconnected, and we had,
We start twitching, you know,
we had satellite internet, but that was not.
if it rains, you lose the signal.
We wired it up, and then the kids could play video games on it and all that. I mean, it satisfied everybody. In the
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
They can.
You gotta
bring
have
that-
It's cool when you get it, but again, we assume, again, shame on us, we assume everyone has that same experience. Like my mother-in-law, could not comprehend that we couldn't order takeout. Like, they're just, what do you mean you didn't have order up? Like, you could open the app, there's literally nothing on there. You couldn't get an Uber, you couldn't, you know, all the things that, you know, techie urban suburbanites like myself take for granted. Oh, they just stop working once you go far enough out. And also, this is where all the food comes from. And
It really comes down to making you the haves versus the have-nots.
There, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Alrighty.
I appreciate
Very
you
good.
showing up and pleasure meeting you. And yeah, I'd like to, you know, for what it's worth, just learning about the education and stuff like that. I've been trying to, again, there's all these different organizations that are doing fantastic work.